Is Indiana in the Morning, presented as always by First Commonwealth Bank, and our interview with Joe Navarro is brought to you by Bradley's Book Outlet in the Indiana Mall, and what a book it is. 3 Minutes to Doomsday, An Agent, a Traitor, and the Worst Espionage Breach in U.S. History, and Joe Navarro was that FBI agent who not only helped but initiated and then had to fight for this case. Joe, when you hear titles such as 3 Minutes to Doomsday, you tend to think that's hyperbole, but in this case, not so much, huh?
No, it wasn't, Todd, and it was a frightening time because, you know, if you go back to 1985, 1988 time frame, the Soviet forces were poised against the West along the Fulda Pass all across Eastern Europe. The wall hadn't come down yet. And the atomic scientists said, you know, it's 3 minutes to doomsday. If these folks attack, we are in deep trouble.
And you, working at the Tampa office, by the way, Joe is talking to us from Tampa, Florida. Mm-hmm. You get this note that you're to meet with a guy named Rod Ramsey. And this is the initial stage of investigation that I said earlier, you had to fight for this investigation. When did it become clear to you that Rod Ramsey was more than just your typical routine everyday interview?
Well, you know, he was initially approached because he would have been a witness, and so he wasn't a suspect. But in the initial interview, as you know, Todd, from the book, when I started to talk to him, and I mentioned that a man named Clyde Lee Conrad had just been arrested the night before in Germany, his cigarette in his hand just shook. And so we went on and talked about other things, and then it shook again multiple times every time I mentioned that name. And I had been studying body language for a long time, and I said, you know, there's something wrong with this. And for me, it was one of those decisions that I had to make. And I said, you know, the Army, Washington is looking at this individual as a witness. I think there's more to this. And so I'm going to pursue it as a suspect.
And so you pick up on that one tiny signal. Mm-hmm. And what you do in the book that fascinates me so much is you do tiny little things that we might, as normal folks, would never notice, and you build them into real indicators of what might be a very dangerous behavior. That was one of them, but you notice more and more and more about this guy, and just to watch that unfold, we can almost watch it unfold within your mind as you get an idea of how dangerous this guy is.
It's, I think you nailed it correct in your assessment. Incrementally, I'm noticing behaviors as he's talking about different things that let me know something's wrong here. And it's both verbal and nonverbal, because rather than ask him, how much money were you earning, how much money were you spending, something maybe a novice would ask, I started to talk to him about, what was the cost of food and how much were you spending on gasoline and stuff like that. And he revealed a lot about himself, but in doing so, I was able to do the calculus and figure out he's spending 6 to 7 times as much as he's earning. Where is that money coming from? And so the combination of the verbals, the nonverbals, I'm starting to put a picture together that something's amiss here.
So Rod Ramsey, to set the stage, is in the Army, and he's stationed in Germany. Yes. And he has a very, very sensitive job, and he is unusually equipped mentally for what he ended up doing in betraying our country.
Yeah, exactly right. So he is the top secret custodian of documents. Imagine having that trust. Most of us would be honored to have that and to carry out the duties of protecting that, but not him. And so that was his charge. And at the same time, he's supremely intelligent. He scored the second highest score on the IQ test that the Army has ever given. And so here was an individual who was super bright, but at the same time super amoral, and that is one dangerous combination.
Joe Navarro is our guest, a former special agent with the FBI, and you hook up with this Rod Ramsey character, and the case develops. One of the interesting things as well about the book is your battle to keep this investigation going, and there was even a period of over a year when you were specifically forbidden to do anything on this case with Rod Ramsey. Those battles within the FBI, we don't see that from the outside, but inside it must have been tremendously frustrating for you.
It was very frustrating because oftentimes the biggest obstacles were within the organization. You know, as you remember, on 9/11, the one of the big criticism was a failure to communicate, failure of headquarters to respond to the field. Well, I can tell you that 20 years earlier, you know, this is the way bureaucracies are. This is the way humans are. I had to fight to interview a suspect, fight to collect evidence, fight to do a proper crime scene, fight to conduct interviews in other countries. And you know, if you were an outsider, you'd say, what team are these people on? But that was the reality, and it almost got derailed, not once, not twice, but almost a dozen times. And, you know, there was just something in me that said, don't give this up. You can't give this up. There is something more to this, and what we didn't know was how bad it was going to be.
One thing I do not want to do in the course of this interview is give away what happens, but I do want to talk a little bit more about Rod Ramsey, because we've talked about his intelligence, the photographic memory, and all of that. The interview process with him and with some amazing partners that you had to help you with this interview process, were there points in there where you doubted yourself, where you said to yourself, he's playing me, I'm not playing him? That whole, it's characterized as a cat and mouse game. It really is.
Yeah, you know, and you were right. I had some great partners who were able to keep me anchored and focused and help me out. Some of these interviews, as you know, went for 8, 9, 10 hours. And, you know, he could have walked away at any moment. He could have asked for an attorney. He was free to do that at any moment. But there were times where his intellect and his abilities to manipulate forced me to question, where am I headed with this? Who's playing who? I'm supposed to be, you know, we're the good guys. We're supposed to be in charge. And there were times where we felt he was leading us astray. I wish cat and mouse games were as easy or as difficult, I should say as difficult as this, because I can tell you from one interview, my partner, when we were done, I got up and she said, "Did you spill a drink on yourself?" And I said, "No, what are you talking about?" And she says, "Your back and you're wet from your shoulder blades down to your legs," and that was from sweat.
Well, the whole interview process, the way that you set it up, and it actually led to something later in your career as a founding member of the FBI's National Security Division Behavioral Analysis Program. I don't know what attracted you to the whole idea of body language and the nuances of an investigation, but my, once you got into it, you stayed with it, and because of what you did, we have a whole new way of investigating.
Exactly. I was always fascinated with how people communicate non-verbally, and I found, in the FBI, most of the interviews, there was a large nonverbal component. So I became the Bureau's expert on that, and I certainly used it in all my investigations. And as most people find, we reveal our thoughts and fears and desires non-verbally. Just tell a child they're going to Disney World and watch how they get happy feet, right? Mm-hmm. They get really happy feet. These things we communicate, and I found those to be more accurate than oftentimes what people say.
a wisp of smoke, a little piece of paper that might seem innocuous, and some interesting body language, and a case is built. The book is called 3 Minutes to Doomsday, An Agent, a Traitor, and the Worst Espionage Breach in U.S. History. It is an amazing read. And Joe, I want to thank you for your service, number one, but number two, for allowing us inside this world that none of us ever knew existed with this book.
Thank you, Todd. It's my pleasure to be with you and your audience.